Her clothes hit the wet pavement before she even reached the bottom of the stairs. Nadia Voss stood in the middle of the sidewalk, rain soaking through her blazer, watching her daughter's stuffed rabbit land face down in a puddle. Around her, neighbors pressed their faces against windows. A woman across the street covered her mouth. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. Reginald Croft stood on the steps of the building he owned, all 14 floors of it, and he smiled. "You had 3 chances," he said, loud enough for the whole block to hear. Three.
And every single time you had an
excuse. He kicked a cardboard box to the edge of the top step and let it tip. Nadia's daughter's drawings scattered across the wet concrete. "I run a business, not a charity. You should have thought about that before you decided a single mother's sob story was going to pay your rent." Nadia did not cry. She had trained herself out of that years ago. She bent down slowly, picked up the stuffed rabbit, and tucked it under her arm. Then she stood straight, met Reginald's eyes with the kind of stillness that makes powerful men uneasy, and said, clearly and without raising her voice, "You will answer for today." "Sooner than you think." Reginald laughed. It was the laugh of a man who had never once faced a consequence in his 61 years on this earth. "Get off my property," he said, "before I call someone who actually has authority." She walked away. She did not run. She did not look back. She walked down the rain-slicked street with her daughter's rabbit under her arm, and 12 years of quiet fury burning behind her eyes, and Reginald Croft had no idea that the most dangerous person he had ever met had just left his building. But before we go any further, if you have never seen a story flip this completely, this fast, stay right here. Subscribe to this channel right now, hit that like button, and drop your country or city in the comments below. We want to know where in the world you are watching from. Now let's get back to Nadia, because what happens next will make your jaw drop. The rain did not let up that evening. Nadia sat in her sister's apartment with her daughter Camille, asleep against her shoulder, and she stared at the ceiling for a long time. Not with defeat, with calculation. Because Nadia Voss was not just a single mother who had fallen behind on rent during the worst 3 months of her life. She was a woman 12 days away from a result that would change the entire state. And Reginald Croft, with his smug mouth and his 14-floor building, and his habit of throwing black women's belongings into the rain, had just made the worst mistake of his property-owning career. The state gubernatorial inauguration was a massive event. The Capitol had been preparing for weeks. Network cameras lined the steps of the State House. Protesters and supporters filled the plaza. Elected officials, donors, corporate leaders, and journalists packed every available inch of the event floor. The new administration had promised to be the most aggressive on housing rights the state had ever seen, and nearly every real estate mogul in the region had shown up hoping to make early contact, offer congratulations, and quietly remind whoever was in charge that they were major contributors to the campaign. Reginald Croft was among them. He wore a charcoal suit and a look of supreme confidence. He had donated $240,000 across various PACs and funds. He knew 3 of the incoming cabinet members by their first names. He shook hands easily, laughed at jokes he found boring, and positioned himself near the front of the VIP section where the cameras would catch him. He was untouchable. He always had been. The ceremony began. The Chief Justice took the podium. The crowd stilled. There was a quiet, charged moment before the doors behind the podium opened, and then the applause began, rolling forward through the crowd like a wave. Reginald clapped along with everyone else. He was already composing the text he would send to his attorney about the favorable regulatory environment he expected under the new administration. He was thinking about the downtown development project he needed permit approval for by spring. He was not, in any meaningful way, paying attention to the figure walking to the podium. Not until she was standing at the microphone. Not until the Chief Justice said her name. Not until Nadia Voss, governor-elect. Nadia Voss placed both hands on the podium and looked out over the crowd with the same calm, devastating stillness she had worn on a rain-soaked sidewalk 12 days ago. Reginald's phone slipped from his hand. He did not notice. He could not move. His entire body had gone cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature in the room. She was here. She was here. She was standing at the podium of the state capitol in a deep burgundy suit with her shoulders squared and a look on her face that Reginald recognized immediately because it was the same look she had given him before she walked away. The look that said she already knew what was coming. The look that said she had always known. If you are watching right now and your heart is pounding good, because so is ours, subscribe to this channel before the next part of this story because we are nowhere near the end. And you do not want to miss what Nadia does next. Drop your location in the comments. We want to hear from you. Now stay with us. She spoke without notes. This state has a problem, Nadia said, her voice filling every corner of the hall. And it is not a complicated one. The problem is simple. For decades, the people with the most power over where families live have faced the least accountability for how they treat those families. That ends today. The applause was immediate and thunderous. Reginald did not clap. His mouth was slightly open. His skin had gone ashen beneath the overhead lighting. Around him, donors and officials cheered, completely unaware that the man standing in their midst had, 12 days ago, thrown the new governor's daughter's drawings into the rain. My first act as governor, Nadia continued, will be the signing of Executive Order 1, a full audit of every residential property management firm in this state with more than 50 units under management. Every fee, every surcharge, every lease termination, every eviction filing from the past 7 years, reviewed against the tenant protection statutes that too many landlords have spent too long pretending do not apply to them. Reginald felt the room tilt. Zero tolerance, Nadia said. Not as a slogan, as a policy, as a promise. And then she looked up, straight into the crowd. Her eyes moved across the faces, slowly, deliberately, and then they stopped, exactly where he was standing. For 3 full seconds, Nadia Voss looked directly at Reginald Croft from the governor's podium, and she did not smile, and she did not look away, and she did not need to say another word. He understood. He turned to leave. His legs felt wrong beneath him. He needed air. He needed his attorney. He needed to make calls and burn documents, and figure out how far back the statute of limitations actually ran on illegal lease surcharges, which he had been attaching to low-income tenant leases as administrative processing fees for 11 years. He did not make it to his attorney in time. What Reginald did not know, what he could not have known, was that Nadia had spent the last 4 years of her legal and political career quietly, methodically building a case that had nothing to do with personal grievance and everything to do with patterns. She had worked as a housing rights attorney before entering politics. She had walked through the buildings that men like Reginald owned. She had sat across from families who had been charged phantom fees they could not explain, who had been threatened with eviction the moment they asked for a repair, who had been told nothing could be done because the laws were complicated, and the landlords had lawyers, and the tenants had nothing but the hope that someone would eventually listen. She had listened. For 12 years she had listened and documented and built the kind of file that takes a long time to matter until you are standing at a podium with executive authority and it matters all at once. By the following Monday morning, 72 hours after the inauguration, a rapid response audit team had arrived at the headquarters of Croft Residential Holdings. They came with laptops, document scanners, a court order, and a list of specific violations that suggested someone had been building a case for a very long time. The illegal fees labeled as administrative processing charges, buried in lease addenda that tenants were required to sign under pressure. The safety violations across 4 buildings, fire suppression systems overdue for inspection by years, ventilation problems in lower floor units that had been flagged by city inspectors and ignored through a combination of delay filings and back-channel persuasion, 3 documented cases of retaliation against tenants who had formally complained. The ghost units apartments listed as vacant in tax filings, while cash-paying subtenants lived inside them under the table, none of their payments appearing on any official ledger. Reginald spent that morning making calls. He tried a state senator who owed him a favor. The senator did not pick up. He tried a deputy director at the housing authority with whom he had a long-standing arrangement. The deputy director picked up, listened, and said, very quietly, "Reggie, I can't help you with this one. I'm sorry," then hung up. The new administration had moved with a speed and precision that nobody in his world had anticipated. Every back channel he reached for had already been closed. Every connection he tried to leverage had already been made aware that leveraging it would end badly. The new governor had not arrived in office unprepared. She had arrived with files. By Wednesday, Croft Residential Holdings accounts were frozen, pending the outcome of a civil asset review. By Thursday, Reginald's own attorney called to tell him that the state attorney general had opened a parallel criminal inquiry into the surcharge scheme. He sat alone in his office, on the 14th floor of the building, where he had once stood on the steps and laughed at a woman gathering her daughter's drawings from wet concrete. Outside the windows, the city moved the way cities do, indifferent and relentless. He stared at his desk and thought about all the times he had said the word consequences to tenants, to employees, to anyone smaller than him who needed reminding of the power structure. He thought about the way he had enjoyed saying it. He thought about Nadia's face on that wet sidewalk, the stillness of it, the terrible patience of it, and he understood, for the first time in 61 years, what it felt like to have no one coming. On Friday morning, 2 investigators arrived with paperwork authorizing the temporary transfer of operational management of Croft's residential portfolio to a state-appointed receiver. Reginald was asked to leave his own office. He asked if he could make a phone call first. They said yes. He sat there for a long moment and realized he did not know who to call. Every number in his phone was either already distanced or already gone. He set the phone down and stood up and straightened his jacket, the way men like him do when they are trying to maintain the appearance of composure they no longer feel. His keycard was deactivated at the elevator. He walked out of the building through the lobby, past the building staff, past tenants who had come to the front desk for various reasons, and who stood and watched him go in complete silence, the same way a street full of neighbors had once watched, and said nothing, and the silence followed him all the way to the curb, where no car was waiting, because he had let his driver go that morning, thinking the whole situation would be resolved by noon. The news broke across every major outlet by that afternoon. Reporters stood outside Croft Residential Holdings with cameras and questions, and the building behind them, like a backdrop to a story they had not expected to be covering. Tenants gave interviews from their doorways. Some of them were crying, not from sadness from the particular overwhelm of being told, after a long time of not being told, that someone in power had actually been paying attention, that the thing that happened to them had been seen, that it was going to be answered for. Inside the State House, Nadia signed the final executive directive establishing the Croft Holdings Tenant Restitution Fund. The frozen assets would be redirected, after legal proceedings, toward a new affordable housing initiative, permanent housing protections for single-parent households, funded by the very properties that had exploited them. That evening, she gave a short address from the governor's mansion. "Power is not permanent," she said, "not for any of us. What we do with it, who we protect, who we ignore, who we throw into the rain and walk away from, that is what stays. That is what follows us. I am not here because I was lucky. I am here because I kept moving forward when the people who thought they had already won assumed I would stop. They were wrong. And every family in this state who has been treated as disposable by someone who believed money made them untouchable. I want you to know, I see you. I came from you, and I am not finished yet." She paused. Outside the windows of the mansion, the city lights spread across the skyline like something that had finally, after a very long time, been set right. "No one gets thrown into the rain," she said, "and forgotten. Not anymore, not here, not while I am standing." And that is where we leave Nadia Voss, standing exactly where she was always meant to stand, built by every person who underestimated her, powered by every moment they thought had broken her. If this story hit something deep in you, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story like this one. And we want to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city, your country, your corner of the map in the comments below. We read every single one. See you in the next story.